drinking wildly every day, gallons of whiskey and beer throughout the day, 6 or 7 steel reserves, and just mostly laying in bed and wondering how I was actually ever going to get clean. I had tried it a few times and I was powerless over it.
Hi, this is Tom with Going Into Tomorrow. Welcome to my new friend Shawn. Shawn, do you
Thank
mind
you,
telling
Tom.
us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. My name's Shawn. I was born in Littleton, Colorado in 1975. Born of a um, alcoholic father and also a father who cheated on my mother. Um, I originally was in Denver for about 3 years with a destructive family. My dad cheating on my mom quite a bit, and my mom then in turn got divorced, and I moved to Dallas with her. Then got remarried and went with another man that was also abusive in his ways, abusive to her, abusive to me, and she finally, at least I'm glad that got rid of him, and then ended up raising me on her own. She struggled quite a bit through her life trying to raise me, um, moving quite a bit, going from school to school, and but then I would get shifted back and forth from Dallas to Colorado and to Nebraska area to go stay with my dad throughout the summer. Mm. Yeah, during the time when I was younger, and being by myself most of the time, I was meant to just make my own decisions, and I think part of that is that when I was with my dad, I was able to pretty much do what I wanted to. Um, I was I was taught to live off the land and learn from the land and fish and boat and just be able to do pretty much everything I wanted, riding motorcycles, four wheelers. Got a gun at a young age, about 6 years old, I think, and I was a marksman. But to move forward, so making those decisions during my life usually got me into some trouble. I learned to basically run from discipline if I had made the bad choice or hide from it in any aspect. Um, at about 8 years old, I was showing pornography. Um, uh, one of the more dirtier of the magazines, and that was how I was taught about women. I also got, I think, drunk as the first time was around 8 or 9, um, and uh, and then let's see. So after 8 or 9, my mom's still struggling. I was having problems with school. I ended up failing 6th grade, and um, in turn, my mom decided that she was going to put me into a boarding school, which actually was a great school, but I would live there um, probably 12 through 14. And but I didn't like it. It was something that wasn't the structure I needed, the discipline I needed, but it wasn't the real world to me. I wasn't able to be out in the wilderness and things like that. Just it wasn't real life to me. So I ended up escaping from there. My mom finally decided that she would let me go into another school in town. She got me to Lutheran High School, and I ended up ultimately doing well there. Um, but the whole time, also running from discipline, starting to fall into the wrong crowds. Ultimately, I didn't get expelled for really anything that I'd done disciplinary wise for breaking the rules or anything. I just did an essay that they said that I was conforming to the drug culture, and it was on the Salem witch trials, which ended actually the essay ended up I was right, and they were, that's besides the point. So after that, I was went to public schools, to Berkner High School, and because being sheltered away from girls and away from relationships mostly, I started to lust over girls and try to seek sexual relations with girls at a young age. So 14 was the first time I was with a girl, and it was meaningless. It was completely meaningless sex, like it talks in the big book. And so let's see. After that first encounter, I was kind of like I would just let off. I was let off my leash, and so that would turn into drugs and alcohol. Even though I was in a Christian family, my mom was a great lady. They tried to organize me in a Christian life. I basically just went off. I went the other direction. Um, and so that at 15 and 16 stemmed into drug use, uh, wild relationships. Got the first one of my first long-term relationships. Actually, got her pregnant while I was in a major addiction with LSD and quite a few other drugs at that point. Also selling it and distributing it across the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so things started to break down pretty bad. I ended up finding myself on the street and for the first time and out of the house. And I made a decision because of the girl that was pregnant to go try to get my life back together and provide maybe a home for her and the child. Ultimately, it was just me running from the problems that I was creating in my own life. And I moved to Colorado with my father. I did get clean, but I found out that through a wild story, it was actually a lie to me. But she had actually gotten an abortion without my consent, so I lost the first child in my life at that point. Whether it was a girl or a boy, I don't know. That would actually throw me further into addiction with amphetamines and quite a few other things: marijuana, cocaine, LSD, mushrooms, psilocybin, mushrooms, peyote, and everything else. So this would actually basically go on through my 20s. Ultimately, lost another son after being with a girl. It was a fairly decent relationship, except that it started to break down because my son had some serious health things going on, in and out of the hospital constantly, and ultimately his death would bring me back out of the mountains in Colorado, eventually, and um, his death would also cause me to go back to drugs and alcohol and women, and throughout those years, it was nothing but crime, uh, assault, battery, dangerous situations, constantly just basically doing anything I wanted. And well, it was destroying pretty much everything around me. I thought it was only affecting me and that I was doing what I wanted to. It doesn't bother anybody else, but ultimately it would leave a path of destruction over many years, all leading up to my return um, to Dallas with my mom's health. I just lost my father and was in a major addiction at that point in time. That was in like 2005. Moved back out to Dallas. After that, got off of major addiction. Was doing fine for a while. My mom's health went down pretty bad. I had bought in a house, so my addiction started up again. I ended up losing a house, losing a girl I was with, spent multiple times in and out of jail at that point, drug charges, assault charges, and whatnot. So the path would really continue. And then I met my wife at that point. She had a daughter, 7 years old, and I was really deeply into uh, active addiction at that point in time. 10 years of this passed where I got so bad that I mean I was literally out in the garage most of the time with methamphetamine, just staying up for multiple days at a time, sometimes weeks. Um, I was doing illegal activity with a dealer that I knew well in town. Actually, his warehouse was over on Chestnut Street by Austin Street Center, and he was cartel related and very dangerous situations that I was involved in. But I guess I'll fast forward. So ultimately, these addictions, especially after getting drug charges and some other things, going in and out of jail, I quit all drug use, but I was hoping that would be the end, and it actually stemmed into a terrible alcohol addiction. And I mean, I was a full-fledged alcoholic. I lost a couple jobs. Um, I lost several places to live, living off my wife, basically, and her income, drinking wildly every day, gallons of whiskey and beer throughout the day, 6 or 7 steel reserves, and just mostly laying in bed and wondering how I was actually ever going to get clean. I had tried it a few times, and I was powerless over it. I was an addict. Stealing money from even my daughter to to fuel my alcohol addiction, to get out of withdrawals. And ultimately, that would, the last bout in jail that I had wild visions in jail. They didn't give me any medications for my withdrawals. And getting out of jail, I called her and she said, "Okay, well, I see you're coming home," but sounded funny. When I got there, I realized why she sounded funny. She had already packed my car with my daughter and said, "I don't want you back in the house with." It was totally understandable. Um, we tried to fix the relationship at this point, but I was living homeless, and um, after a failed job interview, I basically went back to alcohol and drinking for my last binge. And at that point, the relationship was completely failed. My daughter wouldn't speak to me at this point. And so I found myself living at the back of somebody's house, a friend of mine's house, and nowhere to go, and exhausted all resources. My family had shut me off, my wife, my daughter, multiple friends, still continuously destroying things like I always had. And so at that point, like Paul, he was given a drastic experience, and that's when actually God brought me to the Men of Nehemiah with his. I would say that's Paul's vision. Um,
Yeah, that's great, and thank you for that
yeah.
transparency. I know that God's using that in miraculous ways. So, Sean, is there a particular scripture or verse or passage or character, Paul may be that really speaks to you loudly, given your background and how it's transformed you going forward?
Yeah, I think of First Timothy a lot. Yeah, Paul's story is really very similar. Of course, the thief and Moses's, original things that are always stood out to me, but mostly Paul and then Acts 9, I guess. I can't quote it. My memory's blown at this point, but basically the discipline required and the multiple years of his turnaround from his original vision. Um, Now it's a ministry that I've been given. I constantly am learning from those things and learn to serve others throughout this time.
Sure.
Um,
So it wasn't overnight, but it was powerful. It was life changing.
yeah,
Yeah.
it took months. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's taken months, and I'm still there,
Uh,
struggling on a daily basis with my selfishness and inconsiderate nature, but ultimately actually having a benefit on others who are going through addiction or trauma or just being a servant.
Yeah, so that leads perfectly to my next question. As you think about your testimony and your life experience and how you have turned it around,
Hmm.
who is the next person that God? How can God use your message to really help the next person down the road?
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. So, without knowing any of this discipline, like in Hebrews 12 especially, this is what I've learned, that you have to surrender that there is somebody higher than you, and the one that's gonna be affected by my life story is the person who's in active addiction, who's had many years of destructive patterns, jail time, and actually is especially considering I work with, the unhoused community, um, I understand all this, but I just want, anybody who's in an active addiction that there is hope and God is still there for you. Ultimately, God can turn you around if you're willing to accept the discipline that goes along with it. But yeah,
Sean, I feel so strongly that God doesn't waste anything. He is not wasting your experience and
Yeah.
what you've done.
It's not aimless.
It is going to help people down the road. And I want to say that despite some of the challenges you've had, you've honored your family and your daughter and very, very well today. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you,
yeah.
Shawn.
Thank you, Tom. I
Okay,
appreciate you.
thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.